Some had thought she'd lead Team GB out at the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics. Now, she won't even be there. Charlotte Dujardin, equestrian, dressage rider, jointly Britain's most decorated female Olympian, now best known for overwhipping a horse. Just days from the beginning of the Games, video emerged of a training session held by Dujardin. A young rider trots the horse around the arena as Dujardin hits the animal on its legs, over and over and over. Its legs rise with the strikes, producing those elegant flicks of the feet that lead those with but a passing interest to describe the sport as horse dancing. And yes, there is an undoubted grace to dressage, especially at the highest level, but there is also unease about an Olympic discipline in which animals are made to perform. I'm Niall Paterson. Welcome to the Sky News Daily. Later, we will tap up the expertise of another dressage rider who herself has coached Olympians and Paralympians. But let's start by heading to Paris, there for the Olympics. Sports correspondent Rob Harris. Rob, just who is Charlotte Dujardin?
She is actually the joint most successful female British Olympian of all time. And this was going to be the Games when she was aiming for medal 7 to overtake Dame Laura Kenny. But obviously, she's gone home in disgrace instead. She's been a constant at the past 3 Olympics, winning 2 medals at each of them for Team GB, 3 golds on the way. She was part of the hugely successful London 2012 Games. And she's certainly someone who has made a huge impact in the world of equestrian, as one of the greats, having won every major title.
But as you say, something of a fall from grace. Let's get into why. I mean, what exactly is she accused of?
Well, this relates to an incident either 2 years ago or 4 years ago, depending on who you're listening to. And this emerged very rapidly. We just arrived in Paris on Tuesday, and I was actually with members of Team GB, unaware that this was about to break. And suddenly we got this statement from Charlotte Dujardin announcing that she had decided to withdraw from the Olympics. We discovered a few hours later from World Equestrian's governing body that it was only the previous day they'd received a video from a Dutch lawyer acting on behalf of an unnamed complainant with this video of Dujardin training a horse. And within 24 hours, she said she decided to suspend herself, admitted to her error of judgment and conduct that was not befitting an equestrian rider.
So just walk us through what we actually see in this video, bearing in mind that I am certainly not someone who is entirely au fait with this particular Olympic event.
It was during a training session with a technique that's part of a slow trot motion that was in training for, and it was sort of teaching the horse apparently to be able to lift its legs and tap in the horse gently. But obviously this was very heavy whipping that has alarmed particularly the activists who are saying this shows why equestrian has no place at the Olympics. We don't know why she performed and carried out this error of judgment. She says she's devastated by it, but she's obviously apologising now because the video has come to light.
But just to be absolutely clear, the use of the whip is not in and of itself sanctioned, is not banned by the governing body, the FEI, the International Federation for Equestrian Sport. It is the extent to which it is being used, the circumstances.
Yeah, it's about how you can use the whip. Not just for getting the horse's attention, but it's about the sensitivity, how often that they are used.
I have to admit, Rob, that when I first saw the video, it was the frequency with which this, what I'm told is a training whip, different to the type used by the jockeys in horse racing that people will perhaps be more familiar with. It was the frequency that she was doing it over and over and over again. And this in a training session, of course, where she's with a younger rider. But compare and contrast, as you say, that piece of video with the speculation of just a handful of days ago that Charlotte Dujardin could be the person leading Team GB out in the opening ceremony of the Olympics.
Yes, she was due to have this greatly elevated status at the Games. A lot of the Games was building up to, could she become the most successful female Olympian from Team GB? And now obviously it puts this focus on the treatment of horses and that the welfare and just what is acceptable with the use of a whip.
Rob, can we just be absolutely clear? Has Charlotte Dujardin stepped aside from Team GB for the Olympics, or has she been booted from the competition? Because I'm a little bit confused.
Well, first of all, we had the statement from Dujardin, which revealed this entire case to the world. And she said she decided to leave the Olympic Games and withdraw. Then we heard from the global governing body, who said that they gave Dujardin from Monday until Tuesday to respond, and she recommended a suspension. They announced that they had suspended her then for 6 months, and this was being mirrored by the British governing body as well. So it seemed like her hand was forced. She'd been approached with this video on Monday by the global governing body, and it looks like she realized that there's no way she could compete in Paris, and a suspension was likely, and it was portrayed as her recommending that she step aside from the sports. And obviously now a thorough investigation will take place into this video, and for Team Djibri, they are focused on bringing in the replacement rider.
But if we set aside the ideals of the Olympics just for 1 second, I mean, dressage, like most sport these days, there is a degree of professionalism and indeed competitiveness to it that perhaps wasn't there 50 years ago. And again, you don't need to be a professional cynic to look at the fact that this video was passed by an anonymous source to a Dutch lawyer, you know, perhaps 2 years, perhaps 4 years after the video was originally taken, as you yourself have said, but release it in the immediate run-up to the Olympic Games, knowing the likely effect that this would have on Charlotte Dujardin's capacity to compete. I mean, you do not need to be a professional cynic to look at it and think, you know, there might be something else going on here.
Yeah, and that is the intrigue. What was the reason for the timing of the release of this video now? What triggered that whistleblower, the person to approach the lawyer in the Netherlands, who's a lawyer heavily involved in equestrian? What prompted them to decide to release it just at this most impactful moment, knowing that it would surely lead to an investigation and, as we've seen, ultimately the forced withdrawal from the sport of Dujardin, a 6-month suspension at the very least while the investigation is carried out. So this act was done to potentially to professionally destroy Dujardin. We're doing this podcast now about it. It'd be very hard to see the rest of the year doing such a podcast on an equestrian issue like this, but the world sporting focus is on Paris. It's on the build-up. It's on Team GB preparations, and you do wonder how much that was factored in when the lawyer decided to release the video. Obviously, he's given interviews to ourselves and others as well. So certainly wanting to make quite an issue out of this, while not at this stage naming who is the complainant and what is the motivation. How did they get hold of the video? Why are they choosing to release it now? If it is about duty of care for the horses, did they have this video for some time? Why not release it at the time they gained it, or did contact the equestrian authorities, or did it only recently come into their possession somehow? Or perhaps, you know, there's a fear. You know, we do have to acknowledge the fact it is very difficult for people to whistleblow, and you know, they can fear the consequences, how they'll be treated, you know, if it will get back to the person who is accused. So you do have to factor that in as well. But above all, a lot of focus on the timing. Why now to contact the governing body with this video in the most impactful week as we sort of build up to Olympics that should have been perhaps the crowning moments of Dujardin's career?
Back in a moment when one coach, trainer and competitor explains what it takes to enjoy Dujardin's success at the very highest level. Now, let's be honest. Dressage is, for most of us, myself included, a once every 4-year event, a curiosity we happen upon, perhaps after pressing the red button in search of the 100-metre semi-finals. Those involved in the sport, however, are deeply passionate about it, for the spectacle and the skills required to perform at the highest level. Pammy Hutton is herself a dressage rider who's coached Olympians and Paralympians. Pammy, for the uninitiated, or for those of us who dip into the sport every time the Olympics roll round, just what is dressage?
Well, dressage is a French word for the training of the horse. And so, in its simple terms, it teaches a horse to stop, start, turn, walk, trot, canter, jump. That's, as I see, in simplistic terms, what dressage is about.
There are some rather more complicated moves as well. I mean, just literally walk us through how the rider of this horse gets to a point where that horse will perform the piafs, the pirouettes.
Mostly through communication. Your horse can read your thoughts. it becomes a partner. The
Mm.
number one aid, which means communication with a horse, is not your seat or your legs or your rein aids. It's what you're thinking, that you're thinking positive things. And I know with my own mare, which I'm rather late to riding this morning, that I have to have a clear head. I have to be in a good mood or I won't ride. And I have to be kind and considerate. And yet there has to be an element of firmness.
I suppose then, for a dressage competitor to be successful in the way that you have been, in the way that Charlotte Dujardin has been at the highest level of the sport, the relationship between rider and horse has to be of all importance.
It has to be, yes, it really does.
So what then were your thoughts when you watched that video of Charlotte Dujardin? In fact, what did you see in that video from your professional capacity?
Well, I can't condone it in any way and have no intention of condoning that. There's no way to defend it. It was, I hope, out of character and is so detrimental for the sport, for her career, and for dressage moving forward. That is not training. The timing of it, though, however, I have to say is questionable. They didn't seem to think that it was relevant until just before the Olympic Games. I've had access to watching her ride and train. She's done a great deal for the sport. That should not overshadow all the good that she has done. It doesn't either condone what was shown on that video.
Right, Pammy, a little bit of research tells me that the move Charlotte Dujardin was trying to get the horse to do is something called piaffe, a type of trotting on the spot. Can you just explain how you would teach a horse to do that and just how hard it is?
Highest Grand Prix movement.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, you can just touch your horse with your hand on the hind leg. You can touch it with one of the new whips that are on the market that have been approved by the various disciplines, but you don't have to hit it to hurt it. This is a whip, and the way it was used that probably hurt, that did hurt.
You are, in essence, trying to get a horse to perform in a manner that is not natural to it. You are trying to.
No, that's not true at all. And if you watch all these movements, you can see them all done loose by a horse in the field. It can be completely natural. A horse can gallop up to a water trough with another couple of horses and spin around, and that's called a pirouette. And a horse feeling really happy on a sunny day with the birds tweeting will very often do something called passage, which is an elevated trot all the way across the field. It's the most beautiful thing to see.
I suppose the issue when it comes to this video of Charlotte Dujardin is, given that use of the training whip is accepted, and indeed it is common practice in equestrianism, it is at a level that is excessive by Charlotte Dujardin.
True. If you watch a horse in a stable and a fly lands on it, it'll flick the tail and flick the fly off.
Mm-hmm.
And so a horse will feel, if it can feel a fly, it can feel the lightest of touches. There are clear guidelines brought out by the FEI that for each of the sports, as there is in racing, and strong use of the whip in all sports and all disciplines is not condoned.
Just to absolutely emphasise this point, in dressage, there are circumstances in which it is not just safe for whips to be used as a training method.
I'm not going to say that whips are a normal training aid in the same way that I won't say spurs are. Some people train horses without reins. Each horse, each person, each training element can be different. I train para riders, and in particular, you can't make para riders hold whips. You can't make them sit up straight. Para riders have huge disabilities. So for each horse and rider, it's different. They're animals, and we have to get this balance right. Dressage
Indeed
is another word for training of the horse. To high Olympic level, of course, it's another whole thing. like jumping show jumps at Olympic level or riding around the Grand National.
What would you do if you saw someone on your property, on your premises, behaving like that towards a horse?
That's a mean question, especially to me, because in my head immediately came murder them. And you're not allowed to show any aggression these days. I would be extremely angry, and I would look immediately to the strongest form of reprimand. I would want to know the full facts. I'd want to know whether it was a one-off. I'd want to know whether it was a two-off. Most of all, I'd want to know that it's never going to happen again.
Pammy, I appreciate that explanation there, because I think for a lot of people that is key to understanding this story. But I want to take you back to something you said just a little earlier, that in your mind, the timing of the release of this video to the governing bodies, to the media, is in a sense suspect, given that we are on the cusp of the Olympics.
I'm not a spy. I have no idea. The timing is suspect. I've asked somebody to be a spy for me. I have no idea, but it's suspect. It has to be suspect. If they really believe the validity of this video, why sit on it till the horses were leaving for France?
Is this the sort of thing that happens at top level dressage?
Right. I could ask you, how cutthroat is all sports and the road to medals?
Incredibly so, I would argue.
I have no answer, but the question has to be asked.
Clearly some speculation about the motivation of the so far anonymous source, but the evidence is there on the video. So let's head back to Paris and our sports correspondent Rob Harris. Rob, look, not even Charlotte Dujardin would challenge that she is ultimately responsible for her exit from the Olympics.
Yeah, and hearing as well from the governing body of World Equestrian FIA and one of their directors saying that, what many can see is the horse was stressed, and saying that some of the whiplashes hit the horse, and that's why they're using this word repeatedly, the distress and the numerous times that the whip is used. And they do say that they do take equine welfare very seriously, and it's all about ensuring that nothing stupid, as they say, is done that impacts the well-being of the horses. And they do see this as being something that they'll perhaps take into consideration as they're reconsidering any rules. But those calls growing from like the PETA group saying that this shows why there actually shouldn't be any equestrian events. They're saying horses don't volunteer. They can only submit to violence and coercion, as they say. And it's time to move on from the modern era. They say, forcing a horse to behave in an entirely unnatural way simply for glory is not something that's acceptable.
Do you think that there is a possibility that 4 years from now, equestrianism events of this type, dressage in particular, might not be at the Olympics?
Controversies like this can feed into that debate. Now, obviously, this has not happened at the Olympics, but it brings that wider discussion over safety, welfare, which sports appeal to younger audiences. At these very Olympics, actually, one of the big announcements from the IOC has been about the first Olympic Games. So gaming will become part of a separate Olympics in Saudi Arabia for 12 years. So it shows where the whole Olympic movement is sort of looking forward to bringing the younger audiences, perhaps rather than some of those more traditional events like equestrian that are part and parcel of an Olympic Games. But particularly in a growing era of activism, if there's anything that seems to endanger the welfare of the horses, then there will be that intense focus. But while we do discuss that, and a lot of the build up to the Grand National at Aintree this year was about how safe the fences are for horses, and it was a national without any fallers at the fences, any fatalities. So there was a sense that some of those improvements to the course did actually help the horses and improve safety all around.
Rob, thank you. Sky News spoke to Stefan Wensing, the Dutch lawyer who provided the video to the dressage governing body. We put to him the point made by Pammy Hutton, and frankly many others, that the timing of the release of this video was somewhat suspicious.
My client was also concerned about the effect on Charlotte Dujardin. It's not that she's celebrating now. It's not that she feels any victory or that she's drinking champagne. Absolutely not. She feels sorry for her, and she feels sorry for the dressage. She wants to change the dressage world as well.
And that's your lot for this edition of The Daily. We'll see you again soon.